Arthur Pendleton, a titan of Silicon Valley, felt the cold grip of betrayal tightening around his throat. He had just ended an emergency board meeting where it was revealed that his chief financial officer, a man he considered a brother, had orchestrated a sophisticated embezzlement scheme, siphoning off millions, and leaving his tech empire, Pendleton Technologies, on the precipice of collapse. The walls of his minimalist, obsessively clean office felt like they were closing in. He needed a sign, any sign, that integrity still existed in the world he now viewed as utterly corrupt. His office was being cleaned by Maria, a quiet, diligent woman in her late 30s who had been with the company for 3 years. Tonight, she was accompanied by her 7-year-old daughter, Chloe. Arthur had seen the girl a handful of times before, usually during school breaks, when Maria had no one to leave her with. She was a quiet child with wide, observant eyes, who always seemed to be drawing or reading in a corner. A desperate, cynical idea formed in Arthur's mind. He pretended to doze off in his sleek, ergonomic chair, his head lolling back slightly. He left the wall safe behind his desk conspicuously ajar. Inside were stacks of emergency cash, the last physical vestiges of his liquid assets, and a few gold bars, everything he had left that wasn't tied up in nosediving stocks or frozen accounts. This was his test. If the cleaning woman and her child, people he had barely acknowledged beyond a paycheck, could resist this temptation, then perhaps there was a sliver of hope left. Through slitted eyes, he watched. Maria was vacuuming near the conference table, her back turned. Chloe, wearing a pair of bright yellow rubber gloves that were comically large on her small hands, was dutifully wiping down the glass surface of a bookcase. Her movements were careful, precise. Then she stopped. Her gaze fell upon the open safe. Arthur's breath hitched in his chest. This is it, he thought, a bitter taste in his mouth. The moment everyone reveals their price. He expected furtive glances, a quick snatch of a bundle of bills stuffed into a pocket, the greedy gleam in a child's eye he'd been conditioned to expect. But Chloe did something utterly unexpected. She approached the safe not with greed, but with a look of profound concern. She tilted her head, studying the disorganized stacks of money and the haphazardly placed bars. Then, with a sigh that seemed too weary for a 7-year-old, she set to work. She began to neatly stack the bills, sorting them by denomination with an impressive, innate sense of order. Her small, gloved hands moved with a practiced efficiency, turning chaotic piles into perfectly aligned stacks. She even rearranged the gold bars so they were parallel and flush with the back of the safe. It was a meticulous, almost reverent organization of his crumbling fortune. When she was satisfied, she carefully closed the heavy safe door until it clicked shut, but didn't engage the lock, just as she had found it. She then returned to wiping the bookcase, humming a soft tune from a cartoon. "Mommy," she said, her voice clear in the hum of the vacuum cleaner, "I fixed Mr. Pendleton's safe. It was all messy inside." Maria turned, her face instantly paling. "Chloe, you know you're not to touch Mr. Pendleton's things. I'm so sorry. It's just, she doesn't know any better," she said to Arthur's seemingly sleeping form. "But Mommy," Chloe insisted, her voice earnest, "it was all mixed up. Mr. Pendleton will be happy when he wakes up and sees it's neat." Arthur continued his charade of sleep, but his heart was hammering against his ribs. This child, the daughter of his cleaner, had just organized a fortune without taking a single cent. In the wake of his CFO's betrayal, a man with a 7-figure salary and stock options, this act of innocent integrity was a seismic shock to his system. The world he thought he understood had just been turned upside down. Over the next week, Arthur found himself increasingly intrigued by the quiet duo. He learned that Maria worked a second job as a cleaner at a medical clinic across town. Chloe often had to accompany her, doing her homework in the waiting room under the fluorescent lights, until late. They lived in a small apartment in a less desirable part of San Jose, and Maria's entire paycheck seemed to vanish into rent and necessities. He discovered, through a discreet conversation with HR, that Chloe had a mild form of asthma, and Maria scrimped and saved to afford the preventative medication, never missing a payment, never asking for help. One afternoon, again feigning sleep, Arthur heard Chloe talking to a well-loved teddy bear she'd pulled from her backpack. "And Mr. Pendleton looks so sad, Teddy. Mummy says a bad man took his company's money. When I grow up, I'm going to work super hard and help sad people like him. Mummy says working hard is how we help." The simple, profound wisdom in her words struck Arthur deeper than any business report ever had. This child saw work not as a means to a paycheck, but as a form of service. He decided to give Maria a substantial, unasked-for raise, attributing it to a company-wide adjustment. But Maria, with her fierce, quiet pride, came to him the next day. "Mr. Pendleton, there's been a mistake with my pay," she said, her voice firm but nervous. "No mistake, Maria. It's a merit increase. You've been doing excellent work, sir. With respect," she said, meeting his eyes for the first time without immediately looking away. "I know what the other cleaners make. This is too much. I don't need your pity." Her pride should have irritated him, but instead, it only deepened his respect. This was the woman who had raised a child like Chloe. The fragile new dynamic was shattered when the building's landlord, a portly, scowling man named Mr. Henderson, showed up at Arthur's office looking for Maria. "Maria, I need the rent, all 3 months of it." "Now," he demanded, his voice echoing in the spacious office. Maria's shoulders slumped. "Mr. Henderson, please, not here. I'll have it by Friday, I promise." "Promises don't pay my mortgage. You have until Friday, or I start the eviction process. I'm being more than fair." Chloe, who had been coloring at a small table, looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "Mummy? What's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetie," Maria said, her voice trembling. "Mr. Henderson was just leaving." After the landlord left, Maria tried to hide her tears, but Chloe saw. "Mummy, why are you crying?" Arthur could no longer remain silent. He stood and walked over. "Maria, is there something I can do to help?" Her pride flared again. "No, Mr. Pendleton, this is not your problem. Let me help. Consider it an advance on your salary." "Sir, 3 months' rent is more than I make in half a year. I know what you pay me. I can't accept that." "Mummy," Chloe interjected, tugging on her mother's sleeve, "you always tell me that when someone offers a nice hand, you should say thank you. Why won't you say thank you to Mr. Pendleton?" The child's simple logic, echoing the very lesson Maria had taught her, hung in the air. Arthur knelt down to Chloe's level. "Your mummy is a very strong and proud woman, Chloe, and that's a good thing. But sometimes, accepting help is the strong thing to do, too." Maria looked from her daughter's hopeful face to Arthur's earnest one. The fight seemed to drain out of her. "A loan," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "A proper loan, with a contract. I'll pay back every penny, even if it takes me 10 years. Arthur agreed immediately. "We'll draw up the papers. Everything will be official." The relief on Maria's face was palpable. The loan agreement was formalized, with minimal, symbolic interest, and payments tailored to what she could afford. A new tentative trust began to grow between them. A few days later, Chloe brought Arthur a drawing. It showed a man sleeping in a chair, an open safe, and a little girl organizing money. In wobbly letters at the top, it read, "Mr. Pendleton, happy." "It's wonderful, Chloe," Arthur said, genuinely touched. "But why did you draw me sleeping?" Chloe giggled. "Because you always pretend to sleep when I'm cleaning your things. But I know you're awake." Arthur felt a flush of embarrassment. Maria looked at him, a mix of shock and understanding dawning on her face. "You've been watching us, I can explain," Arthur began, feeling like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "After what happened with my CFO, I needed to know if I could trust anyone. I was testing you." Maria's face was a mask of conflicted emotions, hurt, understanding, and a flicker of betrayal. You were testing our honesty? At first, yes, Arthur admitted, his voice low and sincere. But very quickly, I realized you are exactly who you appear to be, the most honest people I've ever met. Chloe tugged on Arthur's suit sleeve. You don't have to pretend to sleep anymore, Mr. Pendleton. I promise I'll always take good care of your things. The innocence of the promise, offered so freely after he had doubted her, pierced through the last of Arthur's cynicism. Maria was still processing the revelation. Mr. Pendleton, I understand why you felt you had to, after what you'd been through, but it hurts to know we were suspects. Maria, I am truly sorry. You never gave me a single reason to doubt you. The problem was with me, not you. Mummy, Chloe interjected, her small voice firm. Mr. Pendleton said he's sorry. You always say when someone says sorry and means it, you have to forgive them. Maria looked at her daughter, then back at Arthur. She saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. She took a deep breath. All right, Mr. Pendleton, but from now on, I want honesty between us. Agreed, Arthur said, extending his hand. Maria shook it, sealing a new, unspoken understanding. The atmosphere in the office transformed completely in the following weeks. The pretense was gone. Arthur found himself genuinely looking forward to the evenings Maria and Chloe worked. He learned that Chloe had been helping her mother manage their meager household finances since she was 5, sorting coins and helping calculate if they had enough for groceries. This early responsibility had fostered a maturity far beyond her years. Mr. Pendleton, Chloe asked one day, her brow furrowed in thought as she looked at the now closed safe. Why do you keep so much money in there? Isn't it scary that someone might take it? Arthur considered her question. Since witnessing her integrity, he'd found he no longer worried about the safe when they were around. It's my emergency fund, Chloe, and no, when you're here, I'm not scared. I trust you. A smile brighter than any screen in his tech empire lit up her face. You do? Because you've earned it. Maria, watching the exchange, approached. Mr. Pendleton, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Why did you never marry? Have a family? You'd be a good dad. The question startled him. He never discussed his personal life with employees. I was always married to the company, I suppose. Never found the right person. Or maybe I never made time to look. That's a shame, Maria said, and she meant it. You're good with her. She nodded toward Chloe, who was now meticulously straightening the pens on his desk. How can you tell? Because of how you look at her, and she adores you. Arthur watched Chloe for a moment. I adore her too, Maria. And you. You've both brought something into my life that was missing. What's that? Simplicity. Real joy. The feeling that there are still good people in the world. Maria smiled softly. You were always a good man, Mr. Pendleton. You were just hurt by that betrayal. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a man Arthur recognized from the single photograph Chloe sometimes carried. It was David, Maria's ex-husband, and Chloe's father. Maria, David said, striding into the office without ceremony. We need to talk. Maria's posture instantly changed. She seemed to shrink, becoming more vulnerable. David, what are you doing here? Heard you were doing well. Working for the big shots. His eyes scanned the expensive office with undisguised avarice. Daddy! Chloe yelled, running to hug him. David picked her up, but his eyes were fixed on Maria. Hey, princess! Daddy's back. Forever? Chloe asked, her eyes wide with hope. David glanced at Maria before answering. That depends on your mom. Arthur felt a protective anger surge within him. This man's motives were transparent. Maria, who's this? David asked, gesturing toward Arthur with a chin nod. This is my employer, Mr. Pendleton. Pleasure, David said, extending a hand with a slick, insincere smile. I'm David, Chloe's father, and, well, Maria's ex. But that could change. Arthur shook his hand firmly, his grip tightening just enough to convey a warning. Arthur Pendleton, What brings you by after all this time? I'm here for my family. I made mistakes. I admit that. But I'm ready to be responsible now. Maria looked down, clearly uncomfortable. David, you walked out on us 3 years ago. You can't just show up and expect everything to be fine. And what, Maria? I'm her father. I have rights. Rights? Arthur couldn't hold back. What rights? Where were you when your daughter needed her asthma medication? When Maria was working 2 jobs to keep a roof over her head? David's face tightened with irritation. With all due respect, sir, this is a family matter. Dad, Chloe said, still in his arms. Mr. Pendleton is our friend. He helped Mommy when she was sad. David's eyes narrowed. Helped how? Maria took a deep breath. David, let's talk about this outside. No, Arthur said, his voice firm. If this is a family matter, and Chloe is part of that family, she stays. And as your friend, Maria, so do I. David smirked with sarcasm. A friend? A boss isn't a friend to his employee. I'm sure he expects something in return for all this help. The insinuation made Arthur's blood boil, but it was Maria who responded, her voice shaking with anger. David, you have no right to come in here and insult someone who has helped me when I needed it. Mr. Pendleton is a good, honest man. Honest? David scoffed. You were always naive, Maria. A rich man doesn't help a cleaning lady out of the goodness of his heart. Chloe began to squirm in her father's arms, picking up on the tension. Daddy, why are you mad at Mr. Pendleton? He's nice. Quiet, Chloe, this is grown-up talk, David said sharply. The harshness in his tone toward Chloe was the final straw for Arthur. Don't speak to her like that, he said, stepping closer. You don't get to barge in here and be rude to her. Or what? David challenged, setting Chloe down and squaring up to Arthur. You think because you have money you can tell me what to do with my own daughter? I don't need money to recognize a coward. David clenched his fists, but Arthur stood his ground, taller and clearly ready to defend them. This isn't over, David spat, heading for the door. Maria, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. After he left, Maria collapsed into a chair, trembling. Mr. Pendleton, I'm so sorry for that. Don't apologize. That wasn't your fault. Arthur knelt beside a confused Chloe. Chloe, your mom and I will make sure you're safe. Okay? You can trust us. The little girl nodded, her eyes wide. Okay, you're my real friends. The threat of David hung over them like a storm cloud. Maria consulted a lawyer who confirmed that, despite his abandonment, David still had parental rights he could attempt to enforce. What can I do? Maria asked Arthur during one of their now regular talks. We'll hire the best family lawyer in San Francisco. He can't just disappear for 3 years and then waltz back in and make demands. Mr. Pendleton, that will cost a fortune. I can't accept. Maria? Arthur interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. Stop worrying about money when it comes to Chloe. She is more important than any sum, and you would do the same for me if you were in my position. Maria knew he was right. The kindness she saw in Arthur was genuine, and she was learning to trust him completely. The hired lawyer, a sharp, experienced woman named Eleanor Vance, was cautiously optimistic. The 3-year absence with no contact or support is a significant factor in your favor, Maria. We'll document everything your struggle to raise Chloe alone, the medical bills, the financial hardship. It all shows you are the sole provider for her well-being. The court date was set, the hearing was tense. David's lawyer argued for his client's parental rights, claiming he'd matured and that Maria was under the undue influence of her wealthy employer. But Eleanor was prepared, presenting a clear timeline of abandonment and Maria's steadfast care. The most damning evidence was the report from the court-appointed social worker who had interviewed Chloe. The minor is well-adjusted, happy, and expresses a strong desire to remain in her current home environment with her mother. She mentions a Mr. Arthur with affection and trust, but became withdrawn and anxious when asked about extended stays with her father. Leaving the courthouse, Maria was a bundle of nerves. Arthur, what if he wins? What if I lose her? You won't, Arthur said, putting a steadying arm around her. You saw the judge. She understood. Eleanor says cases this clear rarely go the wrong way. The waiting period was agony. A few days before the judge's decision was due, David showed up at the office again. Alone. He looked defeated. Pendleton, he said, his voice lacking its previous bravado. Can we talk? Arthur, wary, let him in. Maria's not here, actually. I wanted to talk to you. David took a deep breath. Look, I know you think I'm a deadbeat, and you're probably right. I was broke, jobless, and when I heard Maria was getting help from some tech billionaire, I thought I could get a piece of that for myself. He paused, running a hand through his hair. But I saw them yesterday, coming out of the park. Chloe was laughing. She looked healthy, happy, and Maria was smiling. I never made her smile like that. It hit me then. I'm the problem. I'm just the guy who shows up and causes trouble. Arthur remained silent, letting him talk. I'm dropping the case, David said finally. I'll sign whatever papers. It's not about me. It's about her. She's better off where she is. Arthur studied him, looking for any sign of deceit, but saw only weary resignation. Are you sure? Yeah, but if someday, when she's older, she wants to know me, I'd like that chance. Not as her dad, but just as someone who was part of her story once. Arthur nodded. That would be her choice, and Maria's. David nodded and left. Arthur immediately called Eleanor Vance, who confirmed that if David filed the correct paperwork, the case would be dismissed. When Maria returned, Arthur told her everything. She was initially suspicious, but Arthur's account of David's remorse seemed genuine. The overwhelming relief was palpable. Chloe, sensing the shift, simply said, Mr. Pendleton makes everything better. A few days later, the official dismissal notice arrived. To celebrate, Arthur didn't take them to a fancy restaurant. He asked Maria to cook dinner at his house, so Chloe would be comfortable. His modern, minimalist penthouse was spacious and elegant but felt sterile. Chloe was amazed by the size but quickly asked, Mr. Pendleton, why is your house so big if it's just you? Arthur looked around, truly seeing the space for the first time. You know, Chloe, I've never really thought about it. It's just what I was supposed to have. Mummy's house is small but warm, Chloe stated matter-of-factly. Yours is big but a little cold. Her innocent observation struck a chord. The penthouse was a statement, not a home. Over dinner, Arthur made a proposal. He wanted them to move in with him. Chloe immediately cheered, but Maria was stunned. Arthur, this is too much. Just hear me out, he said. Chloe would have her own room, a real space to play and grow. You'd never have to worry about rent or a landlord again. You could go back to school, Maria. I know you wanted to. Chloe can go to the best schools. She can have the best doctors. Arthur, Maria said, her voice trembling, is this because you want to help us? Or because you love us? The directness of the question surprised him, but his answer was immediate and sure. Because I love you. Both of you. I want you in my life, every day. This place will only become a home if you're in it. Chloe clapped her hands. Mummy, say yes. Let's be a real family. Maria looked from her daughter's hopeful face to Arthur's earnest one. Arthur, I love you too, but I'm scared. What if we ruin it? We're from such different worlds. Love doesn't see worlds, Maria. It sees people, and you've already taught me more about what's important than anyone else in my life. It's true, Mom, Chloe added. Mr. Pendleton was sad before. Now he smiles all the time. Maria laughed through her tears. Okay, let's try. Arthur stood and embraced them both, feeling a wholeness he'd never known. But I have a condition, Maria said. Name it. I keep working. I won't be a kept woman. I want to contribute. Agreed. But you're my personal executive assistant now, not a cleaner. And can I still help you with your papers? Chloe asked. Absolutely, Arthur smiled. You'll be my official chief of organization. 3 months later, the penthouse was transformed. Chloe's drawings adorned the stainless steel refrigerator. Toys were scattered in the living room, and Maria's touch was everywhere, making the cold space warm and lived in. Maria was taking online courses, and Chloe was thriving at her new school. One evening, as Arthur helped Chloe with her math homework while Maria studied at the table, Chloe looked up. Arthur? She asked. She'd started calling him by his first name recently. When are you going to marry Mommy? Maria blushed furiously. Arthur choked on his sip of water. Chloe Marie! Maria exclaimed. But you love each other, right? Chloe pressed, her logic unassailable. And when people love each other, they get married. My teacher said so. Arthur looked at Maria, his expression soft. She's not wrong. Maria, will you marry me? Arthur, are you sure? Isn't it too soon? I've never been more sure of anything. I want us to be a real family. I want to adopt Chloe, if you'll let me. Adopt me? Chloe's eyes went wide. You mean you'd be my real dad? On paper, and in my heart, Arthur said. Yes, Chloe yelled, jumping from her chair. Best dad ever. Maria couldn't stop the tears of joy. Yes, Arthur, I will marry you. The wedding was a small, joyful affair in the park. Chloe was the flower girl and the ring bearer. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Chloe shot her hand in the air. I object, she declared. The small crowd gasped. She grinned. I object to them waiting any longer. I want it to be now. Everyone laughed, and the ceremony proceeded. The most poignant moment was the official adoption, finalizing Arthur as Chloe's legal father. She became Chloe Pendleton. Now you're my dad for real, she said, hugging him tightly. And you're my daughter, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Years later, Arthur was in his office, the same office, but it felt different now, warmer when a teenage Chloe bounded in. Dad, you'll never guess what we talked about in sociology today. Tell me, sweetheart, he said, smiling. We talked about socio-economic disparity and acts of unexpected kindness. I told them our story, about the safe, and you pretending to sleep, and everything. Arthur laughed. And what did they say? They said it sounded like a movie, but I told them it was better than a movie because it's real. It's my story. Just then, Maria walked in, her face radiant. Arthur, Chloe, I have news. She took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. After the initial burst of joy and excitement from Chloe, Arthur held his wife close. Another Pendleton to teach about honesty, he whispered. Later that night, Arthur looked at his family, his wife, his daughter, and the son they would soon meet. He thought back to that desperate man pretending to sleep in his leather chair, his faith in humanity shattered. Chloe, he said to his now teenage daughter, you were right from the very beginning. Right about what, Dad? When you said that love is what makes a house a home, you two filled my life with it. Maria smiled, leaning into him. And you taught us that it's never too late to learn to trust again. Chloe, listening, added her own piece of wisdom, just as she had all those years ago. It didn't start with a test, Dad. It started with love. You just didn't know it yet.